Welcome to another From Here to There. This week's guest is Bryan Feller, who has, I guess I met you when we started working on a nonprofit board together. That's when we...
Barnabas?
Yeah, Barnabas.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Bryan is, let's see, how can I say this? Bryan is kind of a business, can I say mogul? A business mogul, always has his mind on what's happening next. You're the president of National Christian Foundation California, which is a nonprofit. How would you describe NCF to college students, I wonder?
Yeah, the short version is NCF. We work with high net worth people that give away a lot of money, and we help them avoid taxes so they can give away a lot more. So we're tax avoidance. We're money launderers for pretty much. Yeah.
Christian money launderers.
Yes, we're Christian. We're Christian money launderers.
That's great. Thank you for that introduction. Okay, and so Bryan, one of the things that we kind of talk about in these From Here to There interviews is where you started and kind of where you've gone with your life and how you got there, kind of thing. I just want to. I had a picture of you on top of a mountain and you had the ski mask on, and you can see the snow and the rocks, and you look higher than you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
As a normal human being. I'm just curious. So you do a lot of climbing. Where did this passion for climbing and hiking, all this stuff, kind of adventure, come from? And how long has it been in you?
Yeah, so in my 20s, I did a little rock climbing, and then I stopped. And when I was in my mid 40s, I had a small stroke, and because I just wasn't taking care of myself, I was eating the stuff you're eating for a lot of years.
Thank you, by the way, for covering the pizza.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I had some pains doing that, but
pizza courtesy of our guest today. So.
Yeah, so I just knew I had to get back in shape. I did. So I started hiking and started climbing again. And the more I started hiking, the more, I started, in the local mountains, and it was like therapy for me. So I just kept doing it, and I started rock climbing again, and started going higher and farther. I did a 200-mile John Muir Trail this year. And I do about 500 miles a year in hiking and rock climbing, and then eventually I dragged my kids along. They never wanted to do it when they were younger, but now that they're older, they wanted to go on adventures with Dad, and so it was super cool to drag my son and my daughter out and go climbing with them. I dragged my son-in-law as kind of a hazing experiment, and it was pretty fun.
So just to get an idea of what 200 miles is that, what's 200 miles away from here? Is that like Fresno? What is it?
Yeah, like almost to Fresno.
So walking from here to Fresno.
Yeah.
How long did that take you?
About 17 days.
17 days.
And it's I think 40,000 feet of elevation gain and loss. So you're going like this.
Yeah.
But
17 days of walking, not on a sidewalk.
True. Yeah.
So you mentioned the stroke that you had in your mid 40s.
Yep.
Can you talk to us about what your life was like before the stroke and what your life was like after the stroke?
Okay. Yeah, so, got started on a career, and, when you have kids, everything changes. You get out of shape, it just happened. And so kids and trying to build my career, I wasn't in shape when I was younger, but I just got out of shape very slowly. And, you look back and you say, I was a complete idiot. I was eating a Snicker bar and Dr. Pepper like every day for an afternoon snack. If you're doing that, that's a bad idea. And so, come, 40 years old or 44, and my blood sugar's pre-diabetic, my cholesterol's off the chart.
You weren't overweight.
I was like 20 pounds heavier than I am now,
okay.
Which is not that, but a lot squishier.
Yeah.
A lot squishier. So I'm not as squishy now.
But someone wouldn't look at you and say, there's a pre-diabetic guy.
Yeah, no one would have guessed that. And that's why I was sitting in a board meeting, in a marketing meeting, and somebody asked me a question, and when I responded, all I could say was, "Bleh." I mean, it just kind of came out like noises. And I thought to myself, what is happening? And I didn't have a clue what was happening. And I left the meeting and thought I must just be dehydrated or something. It was so foreign that could possibly happen to me that I didn't even believe it when it happened.
You didn't fall. You didn't pass out.
Yeah, no.
You lost the ability to speech and the world.
And my eyesight. So I lost vision in one eye. You know, a stroke is essentially a piece of junk. It's caught up in the back of your brain and cuts off blood to part of your brain. If it dissolves quickly, it's called a TIA, a little stroke. It doesn't leave brain damage. That's what I had. If it's a big stroke, it sits there, and you have brain damage, and all kinds of bad things can happen. So fortunately, in my case, it wasn't a huge deal.
Now, diet was a big part of pre-stroke Bryan.
Yeah.
But also, you pushed pretty hard in your work.
I did.
What did your work life look like, and what did stress look like to you then, and how did you handle that?
Yeah, so I've always been I got into marketing early in my career, and so I ended up having a knack for fixing things, and so I kind of went to a series of fast growth companies, and fast growth companies they're awesome on the one hand that you're growing really fast. They're not awesome in the sense that anything can put the company out of business, and so I was working, for 20 years I was working 60-hour weeks consistently, and life was really just about work and home, but there really wasn't anything else. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't staying fit. I was just pushing harder. And you do that and you don't realize that eventually you go, wow, I'm not where I want to be.
Yeah.
I'm getting old a lot faster than I ever planned on getting old.
And I'm not having as much fun.
Yeah, I'm not having fun. So the stroke was kind of a blessing.
Did anything change in your spiritual life before and after the stroke?
Yeah, so I came to faith in Christ in high school, and so faith was always a huge part of my life. But yeah, I think afterwards, just spending a lot more time outside, I found myself getting to know God a lot more than, we have devotions, or I don't know if you're like me, you're busy, you've got your coffee and you're kind of making, a couple seconds for God if you have that kind of relationship. And for me, that was it. And it wasn't until you spend, 12 days out by yourself that you really start to hear things in your own soul that you never knew were there. And you experience the beauty of God in ways that you typically don't in the city. In the city, you feel powerful. In the wilderness, you don't feel powerful, you feel very small. And the beauty of it is just so overwhelming. It's kind of, it's just therapy. And so I just look at things different nowadays. I work with a lot of business owners, and they all feel powerful driving their nice cars. And when I live in two worlds, this world where I drive my car and I feel powerful, and I have my meetings and with rich people and all that stuff. But then the other world is I'm in the wilderness. I'm up at high altitude where everything could kill you. And it reminds you how fragile everything is.
Yeah.
And so I think I bring that back to the real world, or this world.
Right.
And it's a great perspective.
It's interesting, I guess a lot of times we talk to you guys, students, about working really hard. College is hard, so you're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to spend a lot of time. We say for every 1 hour you spend in class, it's probably 2 hours of work when you get home. And that's a lot of time spent on just working hard. And almost all of you have jobs that you're also working. So we we ask you to push really hard. So, Bryan, you're, a lot of our speakers will speak to that and say, you know, I worked really hard. This is how I got here. If you're not going to work hard, then somebody else is going to work harder than you. And when it comes to competing head to head with them, whether it's for a job or for whatever, they'll probably win. What would you talk to these students about when it comes to balancing that idea with the perspective that you have now, as far as sometimes you got to get out for 17 days without any email and just be on your own?
Yeah.
How do these guys balance life?
Yeah. So I work with a lot of folks that are coming to the end of their career. They're in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And so I have the perspective of hearing their regrets. And most of their regrets are around pushing too hard. And I think one of the things I thought when I was younger was that more force would get me what I wanted. But you realize that when you live a more balanced life, you can still move just as fast. We don't realize how much we erode our own capacity when we drive and drive and drive and never fill the tank emotionally or physically by exercise. And eventually, we think we're working hard, and in our own minds we are, but we're just spinning our wheels. We're just barely functional. And so when you take care of yourself, it really is a force multiplier. It really is sharpening the axe. And so a lot of the folks I deal with, their biggest regrets are they just worked too hard. They were alienated from their kids because they just threw themselves into work. And now they're in their 70s, 80s, and they can't get that back. They can't get it back. And in some cases, they've completely alienated their whole family. And so they have all this wealth and no relationships.
Right.
And I'd rather have a little less wealth and a lot more relationships. But if I used to think when I heard people say, self-care, take care of yourself, those people are just wusses that didn't work hard.
Right.
But so I'm not saying don't work hard, but I'm saying.
Because you still work.
Yeah, I still work hard. I'm working really hard this month, especially. Sometimes we don't realize that we're just kidding ourselves by pushing harder, thinking that pushing harder is more effective. And so much of the time, backing off a little bit and just figuring out what's going on in our own soul is going to give us that extra advantage that we need. And then lastly, just, the whole world wants us to be production units. And the people that stand out are the people that have other things going on in their lives, that are living the lives that everybody else wants to live. So the guy that's a production unit that's just driving and driving, no one wants to be like him. And, but the guy that's kind of living this other life that's counterintuitive, that's the guy you want to be like. And more and more. And so even in the corporate world that, I'm seeing that. So. Yeah,
isn't that funny that we see, I see your videos and Instagram posts of you climbing and on a mountain and out hiking, and I want to be like that. Whereas the guy sitting in the office who says, oh yeah, I work 70 hours a week and I'm at the office until 9 p.m. every day. I don't want to be like that. I don't care how rich he is, right? What would you say the wilderness could teach college students? I mean, you've been part of this adventure sort of organization that plans adventures for families, plans adventures for different people, and there's a curriculum to it, and there's a purpose to it. What would be the purpose for college students to go out in the wilderness, do you think?
Yeah, I think you find out a lot about yourself. You find out what you're afraid of. You learn how to deal with fear. It's one thing, everything is magnified when when there's life and death. Everything is magnified, so it gives you perspective on the rest of life. So in this world, we think about anxiety and how we handle anxiety, but in the world where you're on a rock face, everything is intensified. And so when you realize how you deal with the world when your life is on the line, it helps inform how you deal with the world here when your life is not on the line. And how you deal with fear it has such an impact on how far you will go in life. And so fear is huge. It's a beautiful thing if we learn how to manage our fears.
What is the beauty in fear?
Gosh, I think what I've learned about fear is that to recognize it when it's happening versus just recognizing it long after the fact. So you're in an office environment or a work environment, and what you don't realize is that you're slowly going into a fear state. You're anxious, but you don't know why you're anxious because you're not even aware of why you're anxious. And once you become aware and you say, what am I really afraid of? Am I afraid that I'll fail on this project? Am I afraid that my boss will disapprove? Am I afraid that my boss is working hard and he'll think I'm not working hard? Well, like, what is the real thing that I'm struggling with? And you deal with that, you can be free to just relax, because you can't work when you're all stressed out and pent up, just like you can't climb when you're all puckered up, right? You want to be relaxed. And so I think it's good to experience other environments where you have to be afraid of something, because it's fear that often is our biggest limitation.
Yeah, I've heard that called fear setting.
Mm-hmm.
So you just keep asking yourself, what's the worst case scenario here? What's the worst thing that could possibly happen if X?
Yeah.
And then you look at that and you say, okay, well, that's not so bad. I could live with that probably. And you realize that you can handle things that you didn't think you could handle before.
Yeah, or sometimes, when it comes to fear, I'll ask myself, what lie am I believing about myself if I'm anxious? That's a fantastic question to ask, because maybe the lie I'm believing goes all the way back to mom and dad, and even at 50 years old, stuff still goes back to mom and dad, right? What lie am I believing about myself? Am I believing that I really don't have what it takes because, that's what my dad always said? Or what is that? And if you can identify that, then it helps you. It helps you pray. It helps you get your head back in a resourceful state. And it's that resourceful state that's coming out of fear into a resourceful state. That's where you operate in your full gift mix and your full effectiveness.
So have you ever gone through a period of time where you were asking that question a lot of yourself? What lie am I believing?
Yeah. I always ask
answer?
myself that. Gosh. Like right now, today, like we're having a great year. We're having I've been with NCF for 5 years, and we're growing 40% almost every year. And so this year, we're crushing it. My board is sprinkling rose petals when I come in the room, which is unusual. That's that's awesome, right? That has not always been the case, but in this season, I'm enjoying this, and I'm anxious.
You're anxious.
And so I'm asking myself, what are you anxious about? Your net income is up, contributions are up, the team's happy, everybody's happy, and it was, well, maybe something will just, maybe it'll all just fall apart, like this time in my life. Maybe this is just too good to be true, and it's just all going to unravel or something like that, right? And so I just got to...
What if I've reached my limit?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
I always like to ask... I always like to ask our guests to kind of put themselves back in the room when they were 20, 21 years old. So the 21-year-old Bryan Feller, what would that Bryan Feller be surprised about if he met the 50-year-old Bryan Feller? What's surprising about who you are and what your life is like now compared to what you thought it would be when you were these guys' age?
Yeah, when I was 21, I thought I wanted to be a pastor. And
a passenger?
A pastor.
Pastor, okay.
Yeah. And I was married at that point already. It's 31 years this year, so yay for us. Yeah. And honestly, 50, I thought people that were 50 years old were barely alive. I mean, honestly, when I was 21, I'm like, 50 years old? That's like ancient.
I'll be dead.
I'll be dead by then. And I'll be happy I lived a long life. I mean, I didn't really, I didn't have any idea that I would have gone into marketing or
Really?
the twist and turn. Yeah, I thought I was going to be a pastor, and it wasn't till a few years later I just happened to decide I didn't want to be a pastor, and I ended up in a job where I figured out I was great at marketing.
Was it because you had some experience in a church that told you that, or experience in marketing that told you this is really much more fun than I imagined pastoring would be?
Yeah, I knew I didn't want to be a pastor before I knew what else I wanted to do. So I got out of, I got a degree in theology, and all the pastors I knew were guys I didn't want to be like. I mean, they talked a good game, but I didn't want to be like any of them. So I'm like, well, this sucks. I gotta, I think I'm gonna find something else to do.
Yeah. Adele is going to have that moment in a year or two. That's in her future. She thinks she's going to be like an accountant or an engineer or something. Really, she's going to be a marketer. She's going to have that. Right? Yeah, it's going to happen. All right, so just wrapping it up before I open it up to questions from the students. You owned a business once.
I did.
It was a marketing agency, right?
Yep.
And you had some pretty high-level clients.
I did.
Who were some of those clients? Because we'd know them, right?
Capital One, Bosch & Lomb, United Airlines. I know there's a bunch of others that you might know, but those guys.
So you worked with big brands.
I did.
Brands that we see every day. What happened to that business?
It just blew up to hell.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
The short version was I had been a part of a number of fast growth companies, and I thought I am Superman. So I started my own company. I convinced my this last company I worked with prior to that to become a client. So it was one of those things where they liked me enough to where I thought I could have that conversation, and they ended up becoming my first client. And so started a consulting firm, and I got some of my clients through those, the network of relationships that I had. I didn't know anybody in all those companies, but just the relationships you build along the way open doors for you, and so they did. And
just time out.
Yeah.
Say that sentence again. Relationships you build along the way open doors for you.
Yes.
So all the people who come sit here, that's a door that you should open. Okay.
Yeah. So
we like to play fill in the blank.
Gotcha.
Okay, keep going.
And part of the moral of this story was I started out in the kinds of marketing I had known before, which was search engine optimization and kind of creative. And as I started working with clients, I realized that the clients with salespeople are the ones that I really connected with. Mm-hmm. And so I just started riding along with salespeople because I just really like salespeople. It seemed like they were the smarter ones than the marketing people, because they were actually the ones selling, right? Mm-hmm. So the marketing people were in their ivory tower on their whiteboards, clueless about what the real world was, but the people on the front lines were actually having the most interesting conversations with real clients. So I rode along with them as a way to kind of get intel on how do we help the client. And I just found out that I was a good coach. I wasn't a great player as a salesperson, but I was a great coach. And so our practice ended up evolving into this large product launches that were with companies that had large sales teams. And
And then, how did it fall apart?
Yeah, 2009. Yeah, so in 2009, I'd finally got to the point where all my clients were on retainer. There were all these big clients, and I got rid of all my little clients that I didn't want anymore because they're high maintenance and low margin, right? That's what you're trying to do. And in 2009, everything just got crushed. So we lost 50% of our revenue in 90 days. And so I ended up letting staff go, kind of disassembling the company, crash landing that company, and ended up in just one-on-one consulting myself for quite a few years after that, maybe 5 years after that.
That was in 2009. What year did you have your stroke?
2009 to 2013.
4 years later, okay.
Yeah, or 2012. Yeah, and it's interesting you make that point because there's a test.
Okay.
Do you know about this test you take online? It's a stress test.
No.
So there's a test, you can take it online. They basically ask you questions like, have you had a divorce, is death in the family? They ask you all these questions, and if you score a certain score, then you're kind of statistically predicted to have a health event within 3 years. And it's pretty accurate, and it's pretty scary. Because it goes to show you how much these, kind of big events like losing a business, divorce, death, sickness, all those stressors, if you don't have a way to process those things, they get you.
Yeah.
And you don't see it coming most of the time.
Yeah.
So.
Do you guys have any questions? Let's get some questions for you guys.
Where's that test?
I actually did I'll send it to you.
Yeah?
I'll send it to you. It's online. It's free. It takes like 2 minutes to take it.
I'll post it in the pocket.
That's good.
I'll post it in pocket.
Yeah. Looking forward to finding out when my
Final
health is.
Might have a stroke soon.
Eat broccoli. A lot of broccoli, man.
Fear setting, remember. Yeah. More questions from you guys?
I have a question. So I've been with a lot of businesses and consulting. What would you say about your successes as you kind of rode up those cool places, making good relationships and all
Yep.
that, versus your failures, and kind of in that dichotomy, which part taught you more?
Yeah, I think they were equal. I think about the caricature of success and failure is, company did really well, really fast. I stepped out and did things that I was afraid of. I got outside my comfort zone. I had this little donut theory. So inside the donut is your comfort zone. That's when you pretty much expect what you're going to get. Outside the donut is your adventure zone, right? You're out of your comfort zone. And outside of that is the death zone. So stay in the donut. But so I think, stepping out of my comfort zone over and over and over and doing things that I was afraid to do and doing them anyway was so helpful because it really helped me rewire that fear response that I had for a lot of my life. And then losing everything on the backside, you just gotta get on your knees and, pray hard. And the struggle there is to hang on to hope. And that is just as much of a challenge as stepping out and out of your comfort zone is grabbing on to hope. Those two things were kind of equally instructive.
Bryan, thank you very much for
Yeah,
being here.
thanks for having me.